I'd like to say to Norman that he thought that all that he proposed is necessary only in America and Israel. We don't need, I can assure you, we need everything that you mentioned also in Israel. Rock and roll and media and CD-ROM and the other things. So if you think there's a special, Israel doesn't need it, you're very far from it. But let's relate to the main things. We discussed today the future. The future, I think we have to relate now to three people, to Herzl, Ahad Ha'am, and Ben-Gurion. It relates in some way to what was then called the end seal, or the final goal of Zionism, and of, in Ahad Ha'am's terms, of Jewish national rebirth. Whereas for some Zionists and for some people, the end of the Jewish national rebirth would have been a Judenstaat, creating a Jewish state. But if that would have been the ultimate goal of Israel and of the Jewish revival and rebirth, then we have finished the job in 1948. We've established a Jewish state. For Ben-Gurion, for instance, that was, for instance, for Herzl, a Judenstaat. For Ben-Gurion, it was kibbutz galuyot, the re-ingathering of the Jewish people. We've got now 4.5 million Jews, and any reasonable, we had from Yehuda the data, any reasonable projection, demographic projection, tells us that today already there are more Jewish children in Israel, despite there's a third of Jewish children and more than 50%, there's a third of Jewish people, but more than 50% of Jewish children in Israel today already. And within a decade or two, any reasonable prediction says that the majority of the Jewish people will live in Israel. Is that the final goal that Ahad Ha'am had in mind? Certainly not. Ahad Ha'am spoke about the creation of a new Judaism, of a new cultural rebirth, when the Jewish people will become a fountain of creativity, both for the world and for the Jewish people in the diaspora. He didn't believe one can gather everybody in Eretz Israel. And he talked in terms of, especially in the later years, not that only Israel will the return of the Jew to the Holy Land will have, in his opinion, he was a very great rationalist, but in this he was probably a mystic, will have some kind of mystical result. There will be a fountain of creativity from Israel that will go to the furthest corners of the diaspora, and, this is very interesting, and it will create a partnership, a creative partnership between the center in Israel and the Jewish creative centers elsewhere. And this will be the modicum for revival and survival of the Jewish people. I want to relate this to what we are doing. What we are doing is very small. It's a small beginning, but I think we should think in terms that we are one of the elements of this great future revival of Judaism, of creating a new Judaism, which in one way will be a denial of the previous parts, of some previous parts of Judaism, but in another way it will be a continuation. In one way it will be an innovation. One way, of course, and for one part of Jews, doing, and I'll take one example, and this will be the only thing I'm prepared to say here. For instance, the brachot. We have had here much. Our humanistic understanding is that celebrations, brachot, these various ceremonies and so on, should express the spirit, what the being, the identity of the people who keep them going. It should not be a mechanical repetition of what it is in the past. What, as Sherwin said, what once the rabbis, the brachot that they made and the Kassim that they arranged, the ceremonies, represented what they had in mind and what they wanted. Present-day ceremonies and brachot should represent what we think. Therefore, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Avinu malkeinu. If I don't believe Avinu, I have had a natural father, I don't think I need another father. Malkeinu, I'm not a royalist, I'm a Republican, I don't need a Melech Malchei Amlachim, doesn't help me. If he's king of kings, on the other hand, however, we need, I think, not to do away with Kiddush for Shabbat, with Kiddush for a Chag. We have to make up our own Kiddush, which will express what we think. Therefore, I am now, as some of you know, I'm involved in writing and some of our professors in Israel are involved in trying to write something like a new Siddur and a new Machzer for the non-religious Jew, for the secular Jew. And instead of saying, Baruch atah Adonai, HaMekadesh et HaShabbat, we want to say, I've written it for a Kiddush for Shabbat, Baruch Yom HaShabbat, blessed be the Shabbat day, Mekudash b'Mesoret Ameinu, which is sanctified by the tradition of our people, Yom Orah Simcha v'Hitalut HaRuach, a day of joy, of light, and of spiritual uplifting. I don't want to bother you further with it ends with Amen, I assure you. The same as Kaddish. It ends, the Kaddish that I've tried to say, who wants to say a traditional Kaddish? Fine. It's wonderful, we respect him, and it's his dignity and his right. But if he wants to say Kaddish without the supernatural, because he doesn't believe it, he wants to be honest and sincere in what he is saying. And in Hebrew we have got this curse that we understand what the brachot are. And we therefore cannot send, we are sincere. We cannot just mumble things that we totally disagree with and don't accept. Therefore in the Kaddish, we take out, instead of saying Yitgadal v'Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah. Rabbah in this case means God. We propose, or I propose to say Yitgadal v'Yitkadash. It was published in our journal. Yitgadal v'Yitkadash Shmei HaNiftar, the name of the deceased, because this is a case of mourning. We want to honor and remember the deceased. We can in a way, have some innovation, but keep much of the traditional form, and only, not as a canon, that this is it, how a pluralistic way. So that in the end it ends b'chayechon, v'yomechon, b'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'imru amen. Just like the Kaddish says, there's nothing why a Jew like myself, who does not believe in a deity or supernatural power, but believes in Jewish tradition, uphold the Jewish tradition by making up our own as part of the small contribution to the creation of a new Judaism about which Achad Ha'am dreamt. And we think here we are part of creating this synagogue here, and Sherwin and his work and all those that work with him will probably bring in, this takes generations, but we hope that a new Judaism will come. This we can offer to the unaffiliated. Unless we have a healthy new Judaism that looks into the 21st century, right, instead of looking 21 centuries back, unless it expresses what we think today, what we feel today, our aesthetic standards, our beliefs, rather than what was aesthetic standards and beliefs 21 centuries ago, if you have such new Judaism, we will have something to offer to the unaffiliated.
Herschel, Yehuda, and Yaakov in that order, and Bernie and Charles. And I think probably that will do it.
Sherwin, with all due respect to your history teacher, I'd like to offer a corollary that you can't mold the future without knowing and understanding the past.
I agree with you totally.
And I think it's important for us to know our own past, and that given the magnificence of this building and the magnificence of Sherwin's achievement, it did not come out of thin air. It stands on the shoulders of, for example, secular Jewish schools that were founded, excuse me, not in Warsaw, but in New York in 1910 and exported to Warsaw. And those secular Jewish schools founded in 1910 went through all sorts of changes and divisions and metamorphoses, but they exist to this day, growing out of the past, standing on the shoulders of the past. They exist, one of which I know intimately, because I've been involved with it for over 30 years, exists to this day with 100 children who learn, and someone asked the question, how long? Who learn in 2.5 hours a week on Sunday the most important lesson we can possibly teach them, that there are many ways to be part of the Jewish people. If they learn that by the time they graduate, we have succeeded. I don't think that we succeed in the Sherwin Community Organization because of charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders, though they may seem to be tremendously important, also may belong to the past. The 21st century may require, instead of charisma, the individual empowerment that is to some extent expressed in rock music, to some extent made more possible by computers and the internet. It may well be that in order to succeed in the 21st century, we have to liberate ourselves from some of the forms of the past. Heaven knows that those forms have not been as successful as all their advocates would have us believe. That's why we have the question of the unaffiliated Jew, not the problem of the unaffiliated Jew. The question of the unaffiliated. The problem is the problem of the affiliated Jews. We've got the problem.
Thank you, Herschel. Yes, Yehuda.
Pass the microphone.
I would like to, first of all, agree with Sherwin's basic message, because it is perfectly clear to me that what we need is not a concentration of Jewish endeavor in fundamentalist or quasi-fundamentalist or charismatically led separateness. Pat Robertson is a great success. I would rather do without it. I think that the message of a pluralistic approach, which says perfectly clearly, and Yaakov said the same thing, secular humanistic Judaism is one possible option out of many. It is, in my view, maybe in Sherwin's or Yaakov's view, the best choice. But we are in a very good tradition, a Jewish tradition, where everybody thinks he's absolutely right and everybody else is absolutely wrong, and I think we should go beyond that. The third point is that there is no contradiction whatsoever between arguing for the warmth of a community and engaging in the attempt to utilize the best of contemporary and future technology. Computers, TV programs, radio programs, whatever, are absolutely no contradiction to communities. They may lead from communities or to communities. Again, we should not limit ourselves, for heaven's sake, to something too much specific that will bar the way to other approaches which may be equally successful. The third point, and I'm coming back to what Egon Mayer's main direction was, that the problem that we face is the intercultural marriages. We then added the question of the birth rate. But how do we accept the growing number of people who were not born Jewish? And Herschel's idea to celebrate the Christianity or Islam or whatever of the non-Jewish participant, to my mind, is absolutely wrong. If they want to celebrate the other person's culture, that's excellent. And in an open society, that's perfectly legitimate. There are other places to do that. The Jewish place is to open its heart and its gates and the contribution that it can make to people who, on their own and on their personal initiative, and because they want to join the Jewish fold. And I think that that is a legitimate way, and it is the only way. And as I said before, there is a precedent for that in Jewish history, just as there is a precedent in Jewish history for just about anything you want to care about. Because there were, in the Roman period, there was a tremendous growth of the Jewish people through the addition of people who wanted to join, because there was a cultural crisis. And I disagree with Sherwin when he downgrades ethnicity. He does not see, I think, clearly the tremendous rise of another stream that runs counter to the one that he mentioned, of an interest and a growth in the roots of people's cultures. And that there is in the American society, just as there is in other Western societies, a great new appreciation of where you come from and what your cultural roots are. And that therefore the emphasis, not exclusionary, this is not the only solution or the only approach, but one of the approaches is the strengthening of the ethnicity. And my last point is that there is an undercurrent of uneasiness regarding the relations of American Jewry and Israeli Jewry. It is understandable. It comes from both sides. There is no point in crying over it. There is a lot of point in doing something about it. There is no way that the diaspora can exist without Israel. Before Israel came into existence, it could. Now it cannot. But there's no danger like that, because more and more there's an interchange of people between Israel and the diaspora. People move from one place to the other. It's a question of less than $1,000 for a two-way ticket, not a one-way ticket. And you know, it's the other way around like that as well. Israeli chauvinists who believe that they can exist without a diaspora, as expressed in the words of the of the Israeli establishment now, are barking up the wrong tree. Israel cannot exist without a diaspora that continues its existence. The roots of the two, as Sherwin pointed out rightly, are in one place. And the interchange is based on a very good Jewish tradition. Jews are an exiled people. When they are in Israel, they are in exile from the diaspora. When they are in the diaspora, they are in exile from Israel. There is no way we can get out of that exilic feeling. Andreas Iman gave a personal testimony to that yesterday. But if you look at it carefully, this is part and parcel of Jewish existence for the last 2,500 years. And you can't get away from that. And as Herschel said so rightly, you can't get away from the past, because 2,500 years in the history of the human race is nothing. We are the same people. And therefore, I feel so strongly this feeling of continuity. And no, the future is not something that you can look to without carrying over from the past and the present. Only then the future is assured. And therefore, my conclusion is this colloquium opens up a problem which has been swept under the carpet by the establishment, by saying the only solution is to go out and proselytize for orthodoxy, conservatism, reform, whatever. That's not the answer. The answer, as Sherwin pointed out, is to answer the needs of the people that we talk about.
Thank you, Yehuda. The future of this session is not as bright as it was a while ago. We do have time constraints. And I know it's as bad or worse to tell academics that they have to constrain themselves. But in order, Yaakov, Bernie, and Charles, and Renee, if she's lucky, okay. And, but dare I say brief, thank you. Yaakov first.
I just wanted to inform you about two practical things that are happening now and that can advance some of the general ideas that we were speaking about. The Institute of Secular Humanistic Judaism, which has two campuses now, one in Detroit and one in Jerusalem, is developing a program which will be in the future a coordinated program. Sherwin and I are now leading it by establishing, besides the school that exists here in this building, the school for madrichim and leaders and rabbanim, chilonim, secular rabbis, which has about 15 seminars that are giving the graduates a possibility of looking at various aspects of Judaism, and I hope it will grow. The number of seminars will grow. We are opening now in Israel a secular yeshiva, which, like a secular synagogue, is a perfectly normal thing. The word yeshiva doesn't include anything religious. With the help of the Ministry of Education of Israel and of a very generous help of one of the people sitting here in this building. Now, this yeshiva will provide the possibility of a variety of ways of studying Judaism from a variety of viewpoints. A variety of ways will include the re-education of teachers who are graduates of universities and therefore graduates in a specialized field and not in Judaism as a whole, and through the yeshiva, through a curriculum which will give them a pluralistic view of the modern times as a key, as a point of, as a starting point and a point of view from where they can see all the other eras of Judaism, pluralistic view of the pluralism in the biblical period, in the Hellenistic period, in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance, and in various specialized subjects like the woman in Judaism, like values in Judaism, like tzedakah, which is a general term of charity, but it's wrong to translate it into charity because tzedakah in Hebrew is connected with tzedek, with justice. And there is tzedakah in justice in essence. It is the obligation that those who have give to those who have not. In all senses, in money-wise, intellectual-wise, in any other way. Now, all these aspects will be taught as courses, as regular courses, to people who will participate, and will give them an opportunity to continue their studies as teachers, as parents, as principals of schools, as children, as young people who are interested in Judaism. And as you know, according to the tradition of Judaism, you cannot graduate a yeshiva. Yeshiva doesn't have graduates. You study all your life because it's a way of life studying. So this is one of the opportunities we will propose. But we will also propose graduation ceremonies through a connection with academic institutions. And the last thing, we will propose individual studies in systems that were developed in the United States on the basis of systems that were developed in Oxbridge and in Britain, through tutorials and mentors, to give an opportunity to individual Jew to study whatever suits him and in whatever environment and framework he wants, so that we can serve the consumer in chavurot, in private homes, in families, or by individuals. Now, the final point I want to make is we have to remember that all this effort is not only a transforming of information, but it's an education of values. It's not true that Judaism is humanism. There is humanism in Judaism. There are Jews who are fascists. There are Jews who are racists. There are Jews who are enemies of peace. There are Jews who want war. There are Jews who want occupation. There are Jews who want occupation not only of this side of the Jordan, but of both sides of the Jordan. And they are still singing the hymn of both sides of the Jordan are ours. Humanism is a value in Judaism. I think one of the most precious and important values. And I believe that the essence of Jewish ethics is really that. But this is not all of Judaism. Therefore, our task is not only to teach Judaism, but to teach humanism in Judaism, in order to fight and to combat everybody who is against it.
This has been an extraordinary experience for me, an extraordinary colloquium, and I'm appreciative to those who are responsible and want to give attention especially to Sherwin Wine and Nancy Shallett, who were primary people. I know many of you helped. It's extraordinary, if for nothing else, and we're trying to take that away, it has virtually moved on time. And when you bring together such verbose people as all of us, that's no mean achievement. It's extraordinary to the extent you have the courage to invite lots of people here who don't all agree to the basic tenets of secular Judaism, and you've invited them from all over the world, and we've talked to each other, and we've listened to each other. So much so that it's generated a degree of animosity, I shouldn't say animosity, a degree of tension and anger, but we've talked to each other, we've heard each other, and I've also felt a sense of civility, which is a rare component in contemporary life. We listened, and I think we learned from each other, and that's very impressive. Especially, I might add, I've attended numerous conferences with Israeli colleagues, and this has been a uniquely civil exchange. And my last point of an ideological note, and here I pick up on what Yehuda Bauer said earlier. All of us are in exile, whether we live in Israel or in the diaspora, as it should be for Jews who keep doing what they do until we bring society to what we aspire for, messianic times, when we all can be more respectful and create a better society. So I don't mind being in exile and working toward that end, and I'm glad to have colleagues like you in the enterprise.
I want to echo Bernie. This has been an extraordinary experience for me, even more so for me than for Bernie, because I didn't have to prepare a paper. I could just listen and kibitz and learn. I was enormously affected by, Zev, by your description of the new Siddur and new Machzor you're writing. And it seems to me that gets to the heart of the point I've been trying to make. What you are describing is an authentic Siddur that reflects your convictions, but without something resembling a Siddur, without something resembling a Machzor, without something resembling Torah, however it is redefined, rewritten, it's hard for me to understand how the Jewish part of the equation will continue. I just want to end with the story that I thought Yehuda started to tell, but didn't, which is the rabbi hearing a marital dispute, and he hears the wife's story, and he says, "You're right," and he hears the husband's story, and he says, "You're right." And the rabbi's wife, who has been listening, says, "You fool, how can they both be right?" And he says, "You're right, too."
Okay. I just want to point out that as we look towards the future, as I hope we all feel we have to do as we leave here today, that through much of Jewish history, and now even today, I think, in much of the Jewish world, women have been not only second-class citizens, but left invisible, held back by glass ceilings, etc. And I think it's very important in our own movement to make special efforts to overcome that, to make women more visible, to do coursework and workshops and reach out to the single mothers and the young women who have felt forever that there is no place for them in Judaism, that Judaism has been a patriarchal religion. And it is very important for us, particularly as a movement, to make it clear that that's not where we are and that we look to